Hi guys, Peter Dingle here, PhD. Welcome to our presentation, Kids, Guts and All, Healthy Digestion and Gut to Rebuild Your Child's Health. This is such an important issue. Now, I'm going to present to you today, part one. Part two and the other parts are on our membership program, but at least this will get you all started and show you where you can make some big differences in your kids' health. There is nothing more important than kids' health. In fact, I really am adamant poor gut health is the single biggest health issue confronting our kids today. No, it's not viruses, it's not COVID, it's not asthma, it's not, because they're all linked to the gut and everything ultimately comes back to the gut. And I'll show you this as we progress. But on a bigger picture, I want to highlight that all chronic illness in kids, all the diseases that we see in kids and our adults, but in kids is increasing. Asthma, diabetes, type 1 and type 2. But some of you are probably saying, well, what's diabetes 1 got to do with it? Because we know diabetes 2 is linked to the gut. Well, diabetes type 1 is actually directly linked to the gut. And they now know that good gut health is protective for diabetes type 1. Wow, multiple sclerosis in kids, ADHD, ADD, so attention deficit disorder and attention deficit hyperactive disorder. These are the things we see, the behavioral problems we see in kids. And one way of dealing with it is often just to medicate kids. And that is covering the symptoms. It's not dealing with the problem. And often the problem comes back, at least partially, to the gut. All your mental health conditions, anxiety, stress. I'm seeing anxiety in 2 and 3 year olds now. Parents coming to our talks and asking, what do we do? And we're finding out what they've been doing. And we realize that no one has any idea on how to look after the guts of our kids. My best message to people is stop treating your kids to death. Stop giving them all these treats that you think, wow, they're going to really love you because you give them another lolly or another sweet or another junk food or more white bread or things, and actually treat them. They are the kids. You're the parents. And as a parent, it's your responsibility first and foremost to look after your kids' health. So all the mental health issues can be linked directly and indirectly back to the gut. So my message here is work on the gut. Then you've got weight gain, growing problem, if you don't mind me suggesting. Even in infanthood, even as infants, the weight that a child puts on is partly at least determined by what the mother during pregnancy is eating and doing. So things like that can make a big difference to the rest of the life of their children. And of course, reducing all of those other pressures that they get. So we need to address gut issues for the broader health. But also, gut issues are on the rise in all populations around the world, but particularly in kids and infants. They're all on the rise. And we're seeing this growth. Now, when it comes to infants and so on, in most cases, parents and the medical profession will talk about colic. And I'm going to touch on colic a little bit in the presentations. But you have to bear in mind that colic is really a description of the symptoms. So the more the irritation, the child is not sleeping and so on. Because it's hard to get an understanding of what the child, the infant, is really going through. So I'm going to deal with this because we know probably 95% of colic is related to the gut. So when I talk about gut, I'm still talking about colic, and I'm talking about gut issues related to colic. So we know that infants, about 40% or so, are diagnosed with at least one functional gut disorder. Now, this is anywhere from a problem here, a silent type reflux and so on, right down to the stomach, the large intestine, and constipation, diarrhea, and so on. So around about 40%. Now, it's probably much higher if you realize that things like otitis media, ear infections and throat infections are primarily gut. So I will highlight that there was a study I was reading just a couple of days ago showed that 93% of ear infections are directly related to the gut. They can actually detect the hydrochloric acid and the pepsin from the stomach in the ear of these children with ear infections. So treating with antibiotics is ridiculous because what you need to do is fix the gut so that the bacteria and the chemicals from the gut stop coming up. What we call in adulthood silent reflux, or or even reflux. So functional constipation is probably the single biggest one in kids that we can at least relate directly to it. And infants up to 12 months of age, you've got 16 to 20% of infants who are constipated. Now, a lot of people think, well, even breastfed infants are constipated, although the rate is much higher in formula-fed babies. And often it's seen that as soon as babies have moved on to formula feeds, that they increase their constipation, slow down their transit time of their bowels, and so on. And one of the reasons for this is because we have a poor understanding of what causes things like constipation and diarrhea and so on. There are different things that we know really well in there, but there's a lot of gaps. So the first thing is understanding this. I'll show you my drawing in a moment, but to overcome constipation in adults and kids and infants, it comes down to a couple of basic concepts. The nervous system has to be working, and that's the one that nobody ever tells you about. You have to have fiber in there, you have to have the probiotics in there, and you have to have the water in there. Then you have to make sure that all the other systems around the body, e.g. your immune system, is working, because either one of any of those things can actually shut down the transit of feces going through the bowels and so on. But we'll talk a lot more about that later on. But we see constipation as being the single biggest functional gut disorder. In 50% of cases of infants with constipation, the mother also suffered constipation. So what this actually suggests is there may be a link in terms of the food, maybe even a link in terms of the anxiety state of the mother, the psychological state of the mother, right down to a whole raft of issues. But that link in there, you might say it's genetic. Well, there may be a genetic link making it move slower. But I tell you what, all we need to do is look at the underlying causes, and then we can actually speed all this up. Now, we find in children who are a little bit older, the 8 to 18 years old, functional gut disorders in about 23.7%. So almost a quarter of kids in the 8 to 18-year-olds have these gut disorders. That is huge. And of course, the biggest one in that is also constipation. But gut pain, the big stomach aches, and I'm not talking about just a bit of irritation and a reaction to one day or something, but almost 11% have these recurring pains, and in many cases is already something that we would call inflammatory bowel diseases, or the precursor to it's already going underway. And there is no doubt about this, because when you look at what they're doing, their eating, their lifestyles, their stresses and so on, you can say, well, hey, it's no different from an adult. It's just getting there. It's happening earlier in life. Now, why we have all these organ diseases, so why we have diabetes and multiple sclerosis and so on, when it comes and related to the gut, is because the gut is related to so many other parts of the body, and vice versa. So many other parts of the body have an input directly onto the gut. And I'll show you some of these, but the first one is obviously the gut-brain axis. Everyone has heard of the gut-brain axis. That's the one at the top middle there. And that coordinates. We've got a nerve that goes literally from our gut up to the brain. It's the second biggest nerve in the body, outside our spine. And messages go down, but most of them, 90-95%, go up to the brain. And it's not just the messages that travel along the nervous system at lightning speed, but also the chemicals that are produced in the gut. And there are chemicals like what are called short-chain fatty acids that go around and can lower inflammation in the brain, or there are toxins from the gut that can cause inflammation in the brain and the nervous system and the deterioration of the nervous system. But here's a little bit of trivia for you that I'm going to touch on a lot more later. But the main neurotransmitters in the gut are called serotonin and melatonin. Now, serotonin, it's the feel good, the balanced one. You want your kids to have a good, level of serotonin, and melatonin, which is it goes from serotonin. When that's metabolized, it goes to another one called melatonin. Melatonin is 400 times more melatonin in the gut than there is in the brain. And melatonin is the relaxation sleep neurotransmitter. But it also plays, like serotonin in the gut, a really important role in coordinating everything along the gut. So if you don't have the right amounts of serotonin and melatonin, then guess what? It's well, yes, you might be depressed and you might be anxious and you might have these other disorders in terms of behavioral and psychological disorders, but it also means that your gut isn't working properly because it's the main one that sends messages to move things along in the gut, open and close the sphincters, e.g. At the bottom, your bottom, so to speak, or your child's bottom. So these chemicals in the brain chemicals in the gut are so important, and it all depends on good digestion to get them. Then we've got the gut-kidney axis, and they know that a lot of the chronic kidney diseases in kids and adults directly come from the gut. You've got the gut-skin axis, and when it comes to the skin, we're talking about your immune system link in the skin, but also just skin. And a lot of people don't realize that acne in teenagers, because we're talking about kids, acne in teenagers is directly related to the gut. Now, let me give you a simple example. Two main strategies. If teenagers got acne, the first thing they do is they go to the doctor, they go to a specialist, and the two main strategies that they use to give you temporary relief of the acne is a chemical called Roaccutane. And Roaccutane is known to actually alter the gut microbiome. So most of its action is on the gut microbiome. And then another treatment is antibiotics. Now, the problem with antibiotics is it goes in there and disturbs the whole gut microbiome, as does Roaccutane, and they work and function, both of them function by disturbing the gut microbiome temporarily. And when you go off them, you end up with problems. And because you're using these medications, even short term, you can end up with serious long-term health consequences. Whereas if we dealt with the original cause of the problem, which is the gut-skin axis, and that has your immune system in there, a whole raft of things related to your skin and your gut come through together. That's what we need. Your endocrine system is linked to it. So the hormones, your gut is probably the single biggest hormone producing, manufacturing, modulating, controlling organ in your body. And while a lot of women and we know about estrogen and men testosterone, these hormones, hormones control a lot of things, everything from how much we eat, how hungry we feel, how much energy we have, right through to estrogen and testosterone effects. But all of these have a huge impact on a child's growth rate and health and energy and a whole raft of things. And there is this huge link between your gut and all these hormones that travel around your body. Your gut-liver axis, your liver is directly connected via a bloodstream from the gut. So all the nutrients and the toxins that come in from the gut go straight into the blood and then straight to the liver. And if your liver can't deal with it, then you end up with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. You end up with liver toxicity, a whole raft of issues that we're seeing in kids. We're seeing kids with extensive range of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And these, again, end up with long-term problems. So what we want to do, because is clean up the gut to clean up the liver. First and simplest process. And we'll talk about some of that. You've got the lung respiratory system. Now, in these times when people are worried about viruses, the single best thing people can do, and look, reality, the single best thing you can do is actually protect your respiratory system. And to do that, you actually look after your gut. There's a link between your gut down here and your respiratory system up here. And if your lung respiratory microbiome is healthy, then so is your gut, and vice versa. If your gut is, then if you disturb your gut, as in the case of people who have lots of antibiotics and stresses and toxic foods and all those things, then your microbiome up in your lungs is not going to be a very healthy one and protective. And that literally protects it. A bacteria or a virus comes into your respiratory system. It doesn't have to actually get into your system, because if you've got this beautiful rainforest of healthy microorganisms in your respiratory system, then you've got a system that's pushing everything out and aside and won't even let it in. And when it does get in, if it does get in, then guess what? You've also got a system in there that is priming it all, and all these good microorganisms in your respiratory system, just like your gut, are poisoning the nasty ones and giving the good chemicals to lower the impact of the nasty ones. So that's why I'm really highlighting, look after the gut, to look after the lungs, to protect you from any form of respiratory infection. Wow, how simple And this is what we're talking about here. And the whole point is all we do is look after the gut, and all these other things come from it. So what a simple place to start when it comes to kids' health, your own health. It's such a simple, somebody comes up to me and says, hey, look, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm a researcher. So they say, hey, I've got this condition. What do I say? Fix the gut. I've got this condition, fix the gut. I've got this condition, fix the gut, because it's a single, simplest strategy to fix. And if you don't fix it, it's going to get worse. And if it gets worse, then all these conditions out there that I'm highlighting up here are going to get worse. So you've got eye retina. They're actually finding that what goes on in the gut has a big impact on your eye and retina and development of eyesight and eye injury and eye damage over a lifetime. You've got your heart cardiovascular gut link. So you've got your gut link, which is all the illnesses that go up in the gut. If you've got a problem up here in your esophagus down to your stomach, you've also got one in your bowels. And if you've got one in your bowels, then you've probably got one in your small intestine and your up here in your esophagus and stomach, and probably in your mouth. So the gut is linked. It's not this rubber tube. It's this beautiful ecological organism that you have to understand. And if you understand it, you can make big, big differences with little changes. And finally, the gut immune system. Most of your immune system, they estimate about 85%, is located around your gut. So if you don't look after your gut in the kids and so on, then you end up with a lot of immune system, autoimmune diseases, the allergies, your diabetes, your multiple sclerosis, diabetes 1. All of these conditions can actually be initiated in the gut because we're not looking after the gut immune system. And it's a result of not having the knowledge. And that's why we're here, or I'm here now, sharing with all this information. So all we're going to do, if you understand that picture, then look at these are the conditions. I can't find a single condition that is not linked to the gut in kids' health. In fact, there was one in adult health. I checked it out. I couldn't find a study linking it, but that's probably because the study hasn't been done. But as I've already mentioned, ADHD, respiratory, asthma, autism spectrum disorder. No, you can't necessarily cure autism and it'll disappear overnight. For some people, it might. And for others, you might get a 5%. I like to say when you fix the gut, you fix the 95 to 5%. And the answer is for some people, you can have remarkable recoveries. I know there's specific treatments now for multiple sclerosis and allergies and all these other lists out there specifically coming from the gut. Trials are going on around the world right now. Eczema, dermatitis, psoriasis, acne, I've mentioned, autoimmune, fatigue, weight gain, depression, bipolar, all of these, including stress and anxiety and concentration and focus. And isn't that what we want from our kids? Because it's those first years of life that it's not just their microbiome developing and their immune system developing as a result of that gut, but also their ability to concentrate and focus and learn. They're learning so much every single day. It has a huge impact on their lifelong learning and ability. So I put up these mice. Why? Not because one's young and one's old. They're the same age. And I put this up because this is what I call the best example of epigenetics. A lot of people have said, but my dad had that disease, I'm going to get that disease and so on. No, the reality is there's only about 5% of diseases are passed on directly. There is an increased risk. So some populations may have an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes or breast cancer, but you still have to do the things that stimulate the development and growth of that cancer and the spread of that cancer, what's called metastasis. And so you have to do that. And so the science shows that it's the epigenetics, not the genetics, but the epigenetics that cause the problem. So if we understand that, we're now in control of our health for the first time. It's not your genes. It's not your genes. You may have every gene mums in the world for breast cancer and not get it. You may have one for breast cancer and get it. Why? Because it's what you do to the genes account. The same happens with your kids. And what's interesting about these mice, these are genetically identical. The difference is one mouse was given some really simple B supplements, some nutrients, and the other mouse was exposed in another experiment, actually, was exposed to a chemical, a fungicide. And both of these conditions led to one mouse being big and overweight and very, very sick and on the way to diabetes, heart attack, stroke, and a 30% reduction in its lifespan, to the little one on the right, the brown one, which is lives younger, longer, healthier, and is free of disease. What was it? It's not the genes, it's what we do to the genes. And so where does it come from when we talk about looking after our kids' health and our gut? Well, we've got to remember that we're hunter, fisher, gatherers. That's our historic perspectives. That's where our genes have evolved. So what we need to do is not go back and live in the caves and go back and just do this, what's in the diagram, but go back and use some of the simple basic principles. Because we're so smart now, we've got so much technology and foods and good things around us, we can actually do this. We can implement, we can find out what we need to do. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you. And that gives you a bit of an idea of where we're going in terms of, you know, what they used to eat and what they did. By the way, they weren't, hunter-gatherers weren't big mammoth eaters and so on. The vast majority was little rodents and mainly fish. So I'll come back onto this as I talk about it. But this is a whole kid's health, including the mum before and during pregnancy. So this, to me, explains it all. And if you can understand this diagram, so even after I've explained it and gone on, please come back and just have a think about it, because this is the underlying cause of all gut and even health issues. And if we can understand it, then we realize that there's a lot of things we can do. So the first thing is, if you look on, I think it's on the left-hand side, you've got oxidation, then across on the blue triangle, inflammation, and down the bottom, metabolic dysfunction. These are the three things that trigger all illness. So I'm giving you this generically so that you can then apply it to you, your family, and your kids. So it's oxidation, inflammation, metabolic dysfunction. Those three things go hand in hand. If you've got metabolic dysfunction, you've got inflammation and oxidation. If you've got oxidation, you've got inflammation, metabolic dysfunction. You get it? They're all hand in hand. So what we want to do is reduce them as much as possible. And the way I see it is, our kids are out here with it, and what we want to do is reduce all these stresses. These are the stresses on our systems. And as a result, you end up with a compromised immune system, a compromised nervous system, and a compromised hormone or endocrine system, which are basically your communication and well-being systems in your body. Now, this occurs in your gut too. I'll give you an example. The best example is that you, with inflammation and oxidation going in your body as a result of consuming a toxin or junk food, your nervous system, the inflammation is going to poison your nervous system. The nervous system then says, hold on, I can't function properly, so I'm going to stop my movement through the small intestine. Or I'm going to hold everything back at the end of the colon where I should be pooping. Or, hold on, I'm going to actually push that food up because I can't get it through my stomach in my small intestine, so I'm going to have reflux. So your nervous system, like your endocrine, your hormone system, and your immune system, control all the actions in, along, and around your digestive system. So we have to get them right. We have to get them right. And again, nobody else teaches you this. This is about understanding the big principles. And there are some really simple strategies. For example, in a lot of cases, people will say, well, you know, I'm taking some drugs and they stop the reflux and stuff. But what they're doing, they're dealing with the symptoms, not the underlying causes. And hence, in all of the programs I teach, I say you've got to have more inflammation, because if your child or you have had an illness for a long period of time, then the amount of chronic inflammation and oxidation and damage and metabolic dysfunction done, and the damage done on the systems is so much. It's not about taking a little bit. It's about actually doing a lot, a huge amount to rebuild it, because your body, your gut, your digestive system cannot heal if it's in a state of oxidation, inflammation, or metabolic dysfunction. A simple example, you've got a sore wrist and it's bruised and it's red, that's inflammation. Underlying that is the oxidation that's going on a cellular level. Now, that is stopping you from using your wrist. Now, you can go out and use that wrist every day, put a bandage on, you can take a painkiller, use it every day, but it doesn't get better. It stays worse. So what you've got to do is rest it, relax it, lower the inflammation, lower the oxidation, and start the repair system off. Simple process for every single injury, and definitely for the gut. So what you're going to hear me say in the latter parts is, when I talk about using a supplementation or a food extract or nutrients and so on, or a lifestyle change, it's not about just doing a little bit, it's about doing more. In this case, the more is the better. So with that model in there, And then what causes this inflammation, oxidation, acidosis, and the damage done to the different systems is our poor diet, our poor environment, attitude, and our lifestyle. And these are things that I'll touch on to show how we can alter these to improve the obvious outcome. Now, when it comes to the digestive system, we also need to look at it as a whole and complete system. It starts up here and it goes all the way down to the bottom. And as a result, we need to deal with the whole issue. So if an infant has colic, for example, it may be that they're constipated, which you can obviously see because they haven't been to the toilet, or maybe they have diarrhea. But it probably also means that they've got some problems in their stomach, because your stomach acts as this fantastic barrier to all the nasties in the environment. And if it's not functioning, if they're not producing their stomach acidity, which I'll touch on in a moment, then they're going to have constipation or diarrhea or small intestinal bacteria overgrowth and bloating and pain and hence colic and crying and so on. So it's about understanding how the whole system works. And one of the most important parts of a system, of an ecological system, is the pH, the acid level, the acid alkali level. And it's simple. In the mouth, it's supposed to be alkaline, and when it's alkaline, bacteria can't grow. How simple is that? They can't grow. So you don't get tooth decay. But if it becomes acid, they can grow because the bacteria tend to be mildly acid loving. And as a result, now, how does that occur? Well, it occurs because the saliva being produced is acidic. Not because you're having slightly acidic foods and things, it's the saliva there. And as an adult, I don't know as an infant, but as an adult, you're producing a 1.5 liters of saliva. If it's acid, then it's going to cause all the tooth decay. I wish I knew that as a kid. I wish I knew. What causes that? Sugar and processed foods, by the way, and stress and environmental issues out there. So you're supposed to be alkaline in the mouth, which helps the enzymes also start digestion. And I am going to do another presentation on healthy digestion in our membership program. So I really hope you get to see that one too, because it is so critical. But we have alkaline, the enzymes start working and they start to break down the food as soon as we start chewing it. Then it goes down your esophagus and it goes into your stomach. Now your stomach slowly acclimatizes. And this is interesting because in infants, infants are able to produce stomach acid almost straight away. Now the stomach acid has lots of functions. It's for digestion, because without it, you cannot break down proteins and some of your fats and get your minerals out of it and so on. But it's also a barrier. And this is the critical thing in infants. It's a barrier to the toxic world out here. And every time I breathe in, every time I eat something, there are bacteria, there are viruses, bacteria, there are fungi, there's everything in there. And my stomach acid says, no, you're not going to get through. So as a result, it protects the small intestine and the large intestine, and only in theory the good ones get through and start to populate and look after our health. So our stomach has to be acid. Now, our as an infant, we start to produce stomach acid straight away, but we don't produce. Infants do not produce digestive enzymes for a long time, and there's a bit of debate over the timing, but it's probably closer to 6 months to 6 months to a year or so before they start producing enzymes to digest the food. Things like pepsin and other chemicals to break down the carbohydrates and fats. Pepsin's the main one for proteins. And if they can't digest the proteins, that's why mother's milk is so fantastic. I'll highlight that later. But the mother's milk, all the foods are already pre-digested. So the stomach only has to stop the bacteria getting through. The digestion is already done through mother's milk. And that's why increasingly formulas are getting better and better and better. And they find out the formulas that are already pre-digested, the proteins are hydrolyzed and so on. And I'll talk about this a lot more later on, but that is the stuff, means it's pre-digested and then it goes into the stomach. The hydrochloric acid stops the nasty bacteria and fungi and viruses getting through into the small intestine. And the small intestine is that squiggly little red, wiggly, curly thing in there. And it's, although it's a small intestine, it's the longest part of our intestinal system. And that, as soon as the food gets into the small intestine, the pH is controlled again. So it goes from alkaline in the mouth, acid in the stomach, very acid in the stomach. And then in the small intestine, it becomes alkaline. And that alkalinity, again, stops the bacteria growing in there. but also enables the enzymes that have come through on them with the mother's milk and the mother's food and well digested foods. It's come through and it enables you to start breaking it down. So important. And then after it goes through there, it goes into the large intestine. That's the green little bit there. And that green little bit is your large intestine. And what's important there is the first part of it, and that's a little tag you can see down the bottom left-hand corner of the diagram, and the green part, and that's the appendix. And the appendix is an incredibly important organ. It's actually there to re-inoculate the gut with healthy microorganisms. It's actually a part of the immune system gut link that nobody seems to notice. And they'll say, well, what about the appendix while we're in there? Unfortunately, all the research shows when you do stuff like that, the kids end up with greater rates of illnesses and disease, infections, a whole raft of things, chronic illness throughout their life. They all belong in the body, and unless there is something serious, really serious, but the appendix is really your bank of all your good probiotics and things that will re-inoculate your large intestine once you if you have any diarrhea or any other gut problems. So it's there to help keep it functioning all the time. But as you see, the pH changes from the top to the bottom, and as it changes, it enables certain microorganisms to grow. So in your large intestine, where it's acid, that's where all the microbiome occurs. And that's what we talk about when we talk about the microbiome. The microbiome is literally the millions, trillions of organisms. But one of the problems we have with kids and infants and adults is the small intestine. And if bacteria have got through into the small intestine, and the small intestine doesn't have the right pH, doesn't have the right alkalinity. Remember, it's alkaline because your pancreas injects in some sodium bicarbonate, your own personal brand, your infant's personal brand. It injects in some bile. All of those are alkalizing. And if it doesn't do that properly, because the coordinating systems aren't working properly, then you get bacteria growing in the small intestine, and bacteria aren't supposed to grow. They're supposed to be there and transit through, but they're not supposed to grow. So you can have really good bacteria, things like acidophilus that you get in your yogurts and so on. Everyone's heard of bifido, which I'll talk about a lot later on, particular strands, all of those. However, in the wrong spot, good bacteria in the wrong spot, good probiotics in the wrong spot can cause problems too, because they're not supposed to be in the top of the small intestine. So if you understand that, and it all comes down to pH, and that all comes down to the coordination throughout the whole digestive system with your nervous system, endocrine system, and so on, which links back to inflammation, oxidation, and metabolic dysfunction. So then we go on to the large intestine. And if you look at the left-hand side of that, you can see that's the little appendix tag there. And that literally, as I've said, is your bank for all your microorganisms. Now, what's important here is there's a huge number of microorganisms, but it's not the number, the fact that there's 100 trillion, and obviously for an infant, that's going to be significantly less. You know, it might be 1 trillion, but it's one of the most diverse and microorganism fantastic breeding grounds in the world is our literally large intestine. So what's important in it though is the 1,000 or more species. And as we age, what happens? We lose that. But the critical thing in infants, and I'll share this with you later, is unlike adulthood where we're supposed to have more and more and more, in infanthood, we actually keep very narrow. It's supposed to be narrow. And it's only when we start eating food, solid foods, that the actual diversity starts to grow. And then the diversity gets to a maximum, hopefully of 1,000 different types of microorganisms, bacteria and virus, probably 2,000 or 3,000, who knows? You know, we don't know it yet. And as it gets out there, that's looking after our health. The biodiversity of a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 15-year-old, right up to an aged elderly person, will determine their health. And what we know is the microbiome after about 20 years of age starts to go in like this, gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And one of the major risk factors, by the way, in terms of viral infections like COVID, is the fact that the microbiome has a very low biodiversity. And as a result, a low stimulation of the immune system and so on, we know there is a direct link between viral susceptibility and vulnerability and the microbiome. But that's in after 2 to 3 years. In the first couple of years, it's actually narrow. And it's narrow because it's setting up your immune system. It's setting up, coordinating with your nervous system, and it's setting up all the other bodily functions that they coordinate. And you'll hear the different strands or strains of probiotics or gut microorganisms that do this, but it's narrower. And when they're born, they're actually born with babies. We now know there's a placental microbiome, and we now know that babies are actually born in their first poos, what's called meconium. They've got probiotics or gut microorganisms in there. And then that goes out a little bit, it stays here. And then as they age, it goes out, and then it goes up and in. So understanding that gut biodiversity is critical. So where are we at? We're at the end of part 1. I've given you so much information. I hope you understand the way we approach gut health for infants and adults and everyone else is totally different, because we're coming from the science of it. And I don't believe in masking the symptoms. I want to get to the underlying causes of it. Now, at the end here, obviously, I want to show you that we're going on to parts 2 and 3 of the kids' gut microbiome, the kids' guts and all program, where you can get that on our membership program. And on our membership program, we have got so much information. I've actually created the membership program so it frees my time up so I can do more research and put it up. I have 30 years of research on gut and health that I want to keep putting up so everyone can understand it more and more. And so we've already got a program up there, Gut Secrets, Gut Solutions, Gut Healing, which is a program that I've developed already and taught that for a couple of years, 4 or 5 years around the country, based on our best-selling book, Gut Secrets and Ready, Set, Gut Health. There's a couple of hours of that sets it up. We've got a couple of videos, 2 videos, a total of just over an hour, all about what causes dysbiosis, the dysfunction of the gut microbiome. And we've already got up our reflux solution. So anybody, and this actually applies to children too, but anybody who has reflux, and that's supposed to be about 25% of the population have regular reflux and 12.5% have it seriously. So we're talking huge numbers, and I've got the reflux solution program. Yeah, it is actually works. We know from science it works, and we know from practical experience, what I've been teaching over the last year, that it works too. So we know how to fix the gut. We know. But all it takes is for you to make a commitment. None of these programs are about just saying, okay, what do I need to take? I'll take this and that's it. There's no magic bullet in any of them. But on top of that, in our membership program, we're putting up new programs every month. Every month, a new program that you will want to see and you get the opportunity to see is going to go up. And it's based on science, science, science. We've already got a program on kids' gut and all, which is based on my best-selling book, one of my original one actually, called The Deal for Happier, Healthier, Smarter Kids. And it looks at all of those issues behind kids' health. We've got Unlock Your Genes for weight loss. We've got your a supplement a day keeps the doctor away. And these are the presentations I've been running around the country for almost 15 years now. And ultimately, I'll be putting up all the research that I did in my studies as well. And I was an associate professor at Murdoch University. So a lot of that information I'll be putting up as well. We've also, for all those a little bit older, we've got all the information about cholesterol too, and the fact that it's not a problem. It's actually how you look at it. And the underlying problem is inflammation, oxidation, and metabolic dysfunction. So I'm going to leave you here, but I'd really encourage you to have a look at our membership program, have a look at our books. And ultimately, what I'd really like you to do is just consider all the options you've got for looking after your health, because we present them here for you to go out and get healthier and stay well. Thank you.